last year, I took a look at several 8-bit hidden gems that I rarely see mentioned anywhere. And you know what? I wanna make this a yearly thing. So let's check out some more 8-bit hidden gems that you most likely never played. This is Moon Crystal for the NES, an action platformer released only in Japan and pretty late into the Famicom's life. You play as Ricky, a young boy whose village was attacked by Count Crimson's forces, and now it's up to you to rescue everyone and recover the village's magical Moon Crystal. The story is told through some really elaborate cutscenes, and not gonna lie, I kinda wish that this were based off an anime because I really dig the art style and plot here. I would totally watch an 80s anime show based on this game. Anyway, the game's graphics range from pretty decent to downright incredible for the system. Not only are your animations surprisingly smooth, but the game really likes to flex multiple layers of parallax scrolling. Like, even on a 16-bit system, this would have been considered impressive. Moon Crystal's gameplay and physics are somewhere in between your typical action platformer for the NES and that of a cinematic platformer like Prince of Persia or Flashback. By that I mean that the level design, enemies, and power-ups are fairly standard for the console, but your character also has an intentional input delay between his movements similar to Prince of Persia. So a lot of times you have to think ahead of time on which buttons you want to press before you actually do them. And throughout your journey, you'll find power-ups like attack and health upgrades and even a double jump. This is a pretty unique game for the system, though you'll need a translation patch to properly enjoy the cutscenes. And the game even encourages a bit of exploration, as you'll often find items if you veer off the beaten path. So yeah, this game is absolutely worth checking out. This is Sylvan, a Zelda-like created by Sega and released only in Japan for the Game Gear. You play as a young boy who stumbled across a magical artifact which transports you to a different land. You're then told you have to find 6 fortresses with 6 magical droplets to save the kingdom, and off you go. And this is a bit of a simplified Zelda. By that I mean that the world is not particularly big and there aren't even any shops or money, though you do at least get to visit towns. And the game will generally hold your hand on where you need to go or what you need to do. Most likely because they knew that you could not waste a lot of time getting lost in a console whose batteries barely last 3 hours. Anyway, you'll explore the land, defeat enemies, collect health items, and taking the occasional detour to find health upgrades. But the real essence of the game is in traversing the various dungeons and fortresses. These will consist of a series of rooms that you have to clear either by defeating enemies or solving puzzles like pushing blocks onto something, pressing buttons, that sort of thing. And as you clear dungeons, you gain new abilities, like this sword swing which cuts vines, allowing you to progress. You can also find new items like lamps which illuminate dark rooms, and you'll even pick up different armors with different abilities, like for example the shield armor, which is super slow but can be used to reach higher locations. The game's world and dungeons are a bit simplified and on the small side, especially if you're used to Zelda, but don't let Sylvan slip by you. And the music is also pretty good for the Game Gear, with the main composer later working on the Panzer Dragoon series. So I say this game is absolutely worth checking out. This is Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue for the Game Boy Color, an action platformer made by Natsume. So you know it's gotta be good. Even though I had stopped watching Power Rangers by the time this game came out, I remember checking it out on an emulator back in the day and being thoroughly impressed by it. You play as a Power Rangers and you can select between multiple stages, with each stage having 3 levels that need to be cleared: Rescue, Battle, and Megazord. The Rescue is where you'll spend the bulk of the game. Here, you select your ranger who all play the same but with different stats, and you'll go around the levels looking for people to rescue. There are 20 stranded civilians per level, but they're often trapped behind some sort of obstacle. Some of these, like doors, only need you to punch your way through, but the rest will force you to explore the levels for special items. So you'll find things like wire cutters to get people out of elevators, drills to open reinforced doors, hoses to put out fires, and even grappling hooks. And throughout all of this, you need to keep an eye on the timer, your health, and your energy levels, as these special items will consume energy. Though thankfully, there are recovery items spread about. Once the rescue mission is done, you go into battle mode. Here, the objective is to find all enemy goons and take them out, with the level culminating in a boss fight. The graphics look about the same as the rescue mission, but the level design itself is completely different. So the levels aren't recycled between rescue and battle mode. And although you only start these missions with just your fists, you can pick up the sword, which deals more damage but will also consume energy. And my advice is to save the sword for the boss fight. And finally, you have the Megazord mode, which sadly is the weakest part of the game. It tries to be a one-on-one fighting game, but your moveset is super limited, and you have to build up energy to use any special moves. You do get to unlock a second Zord down the line, but yeah, this part is just not the game's strong point. I feel like the rescue and fighting missions should have been combined into a single mode, where you'd shift between battle, rescue, and platforming while collecting items to progress through the level. But as it is, this is still a really fun game. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, a Game Boy Color Power Rangers game has no business being this good. Check it out if you can. This is Battlantis, a 1987 arcade game released by Konami, and this is pretty much a fantasy Space Invaders clone. The concept is simple. You can only move left or right, and enemies will either fire at you or come down to hit you. And if they reach your base, you're completely defenseless. But on the other hand, you can fire at these cards, which will give you power-ups like a faster refire rate, let you fire to the sides, freeze enemies, or make you temporarily invincible. Part of the fun of this game is how varied your enemies are and how you have to adapt to their ever-increasing multiple patterns. But the real fun begins during the boss fights. These are massive screen-filling enemies with sprite-scaling features with excellent designs. But in that same vein, holy hell are they difficult! And man, between their attack patterns and visual design, some of these look like they came straight out of Contra. This is a game which, as far as I know, has never been re-released anywhere with the exception of the Xbox 360 Game Room, which is how I'm playing this. But sadly, you cannot buy Game Room titles anymore, so this is one game you should play any way you can. This is Holy Diver, an action platformer released only in Japan for the Famicom. The game's aesthetics are clearly inspired by Konami's Castlevania, but the gameplay has enough twists to make it stand on its own. For one thing, you can now control your jumps in midair, giving you a lot more control, and you can even aim up while firing. But what really sets this game apart are the spells. Basically, as you defeat bosses, you'll add magical spells to your repertoire, which can be accessed at any time in a Mega Man style menu. These will consume mana, but have a variety of uses. So for example, the Blizzard spell will freeze enemies, as well as liquids like water or lava, which can then be used as platforms to jump on. But You can also get more combat-centric spells that deal more damage than your regular strikes. Along the way, you'll also pick up items that boost your stats, so you can pick up the boots which will make you jump higher, or items which increase your maximum health. As with most Castlevania-style games, Holy Diver is pretty difficult, though most bosses tend to be surprisingly easy. In fact, the first boss you fight is actually one of the most difficult battles in the game. Holy Diver is honestly really fun, and the music isn't bad either. The graphics are occasionally interesting, but for the most part, they're fairly bland. I'm not sure why this game was never brought to the West back in the day, because we definitely missed out. But thankfully, you can now easily find Holy Diver online, and you don't even need a translation patch to enjoy this one. So I say, check it out if you can. This is Kenseiden, an action platformer for the Master System developed by Sega themselves. And the first thing I gotta say is wow! Look at that sprite and background detail! If you told me that this was an early 16-bit game, I would have believed you. Especially because Kenseiden is also compatible with the Master System's FM audio adapter, which in turn makes the sound a lot closer to a Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. Look at how this game runs and sounds, and tell me that it doesn't look like you're playing an early Mega Drive game. Anyway, you play as a samurai and your goal is to reach the Emperor's castle, but how you get there is entirely up to you. If you want, you can make a beeline for the palace, but in doing so, you're actually making life more difficult for you. You see, as you defeat bosses, you'll gain new abilities. These can be platform-centric like the high jump, or new sword attacks which are useful to counter certain enemies. Not only that, but some areas of Japan will have training dojos instead of levels. These areas are entirely optional and they are stupidly difficult. Basically, you have to reach the end of these levels without being hit a single time. If you do get hit, you barely lose any health, but you're sent back to the beginning. However, if you do clear these dojos, you can gain bonuses like permanent health boosts and the like. But like I said, these are stupidly difficult. So let me give you some pointers. This is the easiest dojo in the game, and this is the second easiest dojo. Clear these two and you should be relatively fine. The others though, feel free to ignore because, oh my god! Another big help is that sometimes you can find these items which get added to your inventory, and if your health ever drops to 0, it'll automatically refill it, which is especially useful against the bosses. And yeah, that's pretty much the game. I like how you can go back and forth between levels and even repeat previous levels if you feel like you've missed something. And it's honestly a shame that we never got a sequel to Kenseiden, though some Brazilian Mega Drive fans are actually working on that. But yeah, I say you should absolutely check this one out. This is Ufouria the Saga for the NES, a Metroidvania by Sunsoft released in Japan and PAL regions. In Ufouria, you play as... something, and you're out to search for your friends. The issue is you have no weapons or means of self-defense, so instead you must avoid or jump over enemies while searching for them. Thankfully, during these early portions, the game is kind enough to tell you if you do not have the means to progress through the area, by showing you an arrow telling you where you should go. So as you progress through the game, you'll eventually run into your friends who have been brainwashed, and you must defeat them by picking up whatever this this and throwing it at them. Once defeated, they join your party, and you can change between them at any time through a menu. And each friend does something different. So for example, Freon can swim and walk on ice, while Shades can float in midair. Not only that, but you'll also pick up items to help you, the first few of which are honestly cop-outs for the genre. Basically stuff like a password screen, a map, and the pointer telling you where you are on the map. Which, don't get me wrong, they're useful, but they're not exactly the kind of power-ups that come to mind when I play a Metroidvania. Thankfully, you do get more useful items, like a hammer for Shades, which gives you your first weapon in the game, and it honestly took me like an hour to find it. So yeah, that first tower can be kind of annoying, with you constantly dodging enemies, and even after you get it, it takes a long time to charge up, so it's not like you can just use it willy-nilly. Now, with this being a Sunsoft game, the music is incredible. You can definitely tell that they were using the same music tools they used for Batman and Batman Return of the Joker, because the songs just have that awesome Sunsoft flair. You'll know what I mean when you play it. This game is honestly really awesome, and believe it or not, it would even get a sequel over 30 years later, which is now available on Steam, PS4, and the Nintendo Switch. But don't let that stop you from playing the original. Trust me, it's worth it. This is Ogre Battle Gaiden Prince of Zenobia, a real-time tactical role-playing game for the Geo Pocket Color. And this is a spin-off based on the Super Nintendo game, though the story and levels are completely original. The story is honestly not that interesting. I mean, to be fair, the English patch for this game is not complete, as it only translates the gameplay elements and the plot for the first few levels, though it is still being updated as we speak. But truth be told, while the Tactics Ogre games have always had interesting stories, the Ogre Battle series, not so much. The good news is that the menus, units, magic systems, weapons, items, and tutorials are all in English. And even if the story is not updated past Mission 2, you can still play the game normally because of all the HUD elements and menus working just fine. So I just kept progressing through the game, and you know what? I had a ton of fun. So, just like the original Super Nintendo game, you take a personality test which results in you getting a series of tarot cards. From there on, you're sent on a series of missions where you need to capture cities, temples, and markets while your opponent tries to do the same. The movement speed of your units will vary depending on whether or not they're traveling on road, mountains, or by sea, and some units have advantages like how a flying unit is not hindered by water, for example. However, if you do go off the beaten path, you can often find hidden settlements and even hidden items and weapons that you can equip to your various squad leaders. Cities will also provide you with tax money, which you can then use to buy gear and deploy more units. Combat is pretty interesting in that you do not directly control your units. Instead, you tell them which enemy type they should focus on, and if things start getting a little dicey, you can use one of the aforementioned tarot cards for various effects like healing, damage, or inflicting status ailments. One thing I should point out is that battles only last a few turns, and then the game decides the winner either based on who took the most damage or based on who is defending a location. And as their units fight, they'll also level up, making them stronger. It's a shame that the game isn't fully translated yet, but honestly, if you love Ogre Battle and don't really care about the plot, then this game is fully playable now as it is, and I say, check it out if you can.
Fight it out.
This is Delta Shadow, a modern action platformer released for the ZX Spectrum in 2020. The game is basically a fan sequel to the Power Blade series on the NES, only now you get entirely new levels. The game was released for the ZX Spectrum 128K and the Spectrum Next, and there's also a PC version that lets you pick which version you want to play, thereby avoiding having to use any emulators. I'll only be showing the 128K version though, as this is supposed to be a video on 8-bit games. You play as the same character from the Power Blade series, and you can pick between 3 stages, all of which contain 3 levels each. From there on, you have to explore them until you find a mid-boss on the first level of each stage. And when you defeat it, you'll gain a new power armor, which you can select at any time. So you can get an armor that lets you grab onto ledges and walls, allowing you to bypass most level hazards or climb up for secrets. You'll also unlock the jetpack and water armors, which let you fly out of water and in water respectively. The game plays like a mix of Power Blade 1 and 2, giving you all the abilities of Power Blade 2, like the slide mechanic and the various power suits, but you have the free-form movement of the first game, and as a result, each level has multiple paths that you choose depending on which armors you've unlocked and whether or not you have enough energy to actually use said armors. And I gotta say, the sprite animations and backgrounds are super impressive for the Spectrum, and there's a really impressive artistry behind how the colors are being used. And with this being an 128K Spectrum game, it means that you get an actual soundtrack, and it sounds really amazing, using remixes of the first 2 Power Blade games, and even remixes songs from other NES games, like Batman Return of the Joker. The game also has 2 difficulties, normal and hard, and if you pick hard, then the levels actually become longer with more rooms being added in. And you also get this minigame where you need to drive to each stage before actually starting it, a feature which graphically looks very impressive for the system, but is honestly not that fun to play. But thankfully, the core game is incredibly fun. I would even go as far as to say that this is actually better than Power Blades 1 and 2. So yes, I absolutely recommend you check it out. Shadow of the Ninja is an action platformer strongly inspired by Ninja Gaiden, released for the NES. And this game was developed by Natsume, so you know it's good. The game is set in a dystopic cyberpunk future, and you can choose between 2 ninjas. They have some minor speed and health differences between them, but honestly, it's nothing major. And this game has a really fun grapple mechanic, where you can grab onto the bottom of platforms and either attack, shimmy your way to where you need to go, but you can also climb up if need be. Along the way, you'll be picking up multiple weapons like swords, chains, and throwing stars, and part of the game's strategy is knowing when to hold on to which weapons. The graphics for the game are really quite nice, but what really stands out is the music. This game has one of my favorite NES soundtracks. I'm pretty sure every song here is a banger. It's just that good. And the boss fights are also super fun and addicting. With that said though, this game is pretty difficult. The first 3 levels aren't too bad, but it just keeps getting more and more difficult from there. And while this game will give you the occasional cheap death, a lot of these are actually your own fault. And I really love how creative these levels get. None of them feel samey, as they all have a gimmick that is fun to play and helps keep the game fresh. This was one of those games that I downloaded as a ROM in the early 2000s solely because I liked the name. And in the end, I discovered one of my all-time favorite NES games. Check it out if you can. This is Tower of Doom, an action RPG released fairly late into the Intellivision's life. In this game, you have to explore a series of mazes picking up items along the way. When you find enemies, you can fight them in real time or bribe them with the golden items you've picked up so they'll leave you alone. Fighting them increases your battle prowess, but lowers your chances of a successful bribe in the future, while a successful bribe means that you're gonna lose the item. However, if you don't want to fight using any of these methods, you can equip a bow or magic staff, allowing you to attack from a distance. The problem is that your weapons degrade, and ranged weapons degrade especially fast. Oh, but we're not done yet, because like I said before, there are a ton of items to pick up, and you might not always know what they do until you use them. So for example, you can find potions which will increase your strength, stamina, and double your experience. But you can also find cursed items which cause you to lose a level, for example. And the maze is littered with traps like fire, poison, paralysis, and teleporters. And you can either just cut your losses and run through the traps, or you can find keys which will let you disarm them. Like, there's a lot of depth to this game, which is especially impressive considering that the Intellivision was made to compete with the Atari 2600. And you even gotta remember to eat food to keep your strength up. Another cool thing is that at the start of the game, you can choose between multiple classes, each with their own stats and starting equipment, as well as different mazes, which have different levels to traverse. Some mazes are static and will feature the same maps every time you play them, while others will give you completely randomized levels with each playthrough. This is honestly an incredible game, especially for the limited hardware that it's on. And once again, I'm playing this on the Xbox 360 Game Room. And as far as I know, this game has yet to be released on any other modern platform, which is a huge shame, because this game is way better than you might think. Check it out if you can. This is Renegade, a beat-em-up release for the Sega Master System, and in fact, the original arcade version is the game that would serve as the basis that would lead to the creation of Double Dragon. The thing is, I actually think that the Master System version of Renegade is not only better than the arcade original, but I think that this is the definitive version of the game. I mean, yes, the graphics and audio took a bit of a hit when porting to the Master System, though it still looks really good for the console. In fact, in my opinion, this game looks and plays better than Double Dragon for the Master System. The hit detection is just perfect, and we even got some very fun moves that weren't in Double Dragon, like how now you can throw foes onto the ground, get on top of them, and just wail at them. And you also have moves that would later become synonymous with the genre, like throws or grabbing and kneeing them. I especially like how you can defeat bosses by throwing them off the stage, and the Master System version even has an exclusive bike level that isn't even in the arcade or the ZX Spectrum versions. The only other version to feature this bike level is the NES port, which is also a pretty good version, but the graphics suffered a bit of a downgrade, and I swear, there's something with the hit detection in that particular version that just does not agree with me. As far as I'm concerned, this is the best beat-em-up on the Master System, and my one major issue with it is that it's a one-player game only, but then again, I don't have any friends to play this with, so I guess that's fine. But yeah, if you enjoy 8-bit beat-em-ups, check this one out. This is Cosmic Soldier 2 Psychic War, an early JRPG released for the PC-88, the MSX, MSX2, and MS-DOS, and this is a super interesting game. And I don't just say that because of the incredibly 80s menu system, although yes, that does help, but I'll get to that in a bit. Most versions of Cosmic Soldier 2 would only be released in Japan, and though the introduction plotline and the main menus are in English, there's still enough in-game dialogue and menus in Japanese that you can't really play this unless you speak the language. But thankfully, Cosmic Soldier 2 is one of the rare JRPGs to have received an MS-DOS port in the West. And this port is a bit hit or miss, but hey, as of right now, unless you speak Japanese, this is all we have. So, what's so special about this game? Well, this might just be the game that established the monster-catching RPG genre as we know it today. Now, to be clear, this was not the first RPG with monster-catching mechanics. Wizardry 4, for example, predates this game by 1 month, and there was also Labyrinth on the Play-Doh. But here's the thing, in Wizardry 4, you don't actually catch monsters, you just get them on your party. And I doubt Play-Doh games like Labyrinth had much influence in Japan. But this, you move in a first-person maze similar to Wizardry and the Megami Tensei games, and you can meet 2 types of enemies. The first are these humanoid aliens, which you can either talk to get information from, fight them for experience, or convince them to join your party. The others, you can't get them to join you, but you can fight them for experience, or you can get them to surrender and question them for information. Each character you add to your party has different stats and abilities, and their psychic stats get summed up and added to your party pool. And as you fight, you engage in a tug-of-war where you're trying to get your party's combined RNG to push your beam forward. And if the RNG is against you, you can activate a shield that blocks all damage but also consumes energy, before then looking for an opening and firing again. Party formation also matters, so it's usually a good idea to put the character with the most power in front of the party to deal more damage. But now, here's the thing, different Pokemon, aliens, have different abilities, like how I, for example, have Beam and Teleport, Ney here has Shield, and Rika here has... it's too easy. So essentially, you need to balance your party with a mix of good stats and abilities that are useful to you. And you can even find rooms where you store away captured aliens for later use and add old ones back to your party. Yes, it works exactly like the computers in Pokemon. It's pretty obvious that this is a very rough outline of what the Pokemon in Megami Tensei games would later become. But man, it's kinda crazy to think how many things this got right with the formula this early on. Also, it's kind of funny how there's even a hidden spicy scene in the original Japanese version, which was most likely removed from the Western release. They already changed the android's outfit, so I seriously doubt this little Easter egg made it in. In my opinion, the PC-88 version is the best version to play, as the MS-DOS one kind of ruined some of the songs, and the MSX version doesn't even use FM audio. But as it is, this game is a really fun dungeon crawler and a very obscure piece of gaming history. So I say, check it out if you can. This is Banana Prince, a platformer released for the NES in Japan and Germany. No, not Europe, just Germany. That's kinda random. Anyway, you are the prince of the Banana Kingdom and the dragon just stole your sacred banana. Fuck. And the dragon just stole your sacred banana. Eu não consigo dizer isto.
And a dragon just stole your sacred banana.
And now it's your job to get it back. So you can jump, attack with your caveman weapons, and you can magically grow plants on the ground, which you can then climb and jump off of at a higher speed. The game's graphics and music are top-notch, but what really sets this game apart and will be loved by some but hated by others are the minigames, of which there are a lot. You have a board game minigame, shops where you can use bananas to buy better weapons, stores where you get a kiss to heal your health, vending machines, scratch tickets, quizzes where you need to get the correct answer to progress, and even casinos where you can play the dice. Like damn, this is basically kitchen sink game design taken to its logical conclusion. This game has so many minigames that at times I just wanted to get back to the actual game. And don't get me wrong, the platforming is excellent, and these minigames are really fun, but the devs just really went all in on the minigames. But yeah, this is a really fun platformer with great graphics, awesome music, and an excellent art style, and with tons of minigames that you'll either love or get bored of. But if you are the type who loves this sort of thing, then trust me, Banana Prince is the game for you. Seraphima is a modern action-adventure game for the ZX Spectrum. You play as Earth's last guardian in a post-apocalyptic future, and this is a non-linear action game where you explore the world and its various passages for items that you'll need to progress. You have your mother guiding you, and even a Metroidvania-style map. But I honestly struggle to call this game a Metroidvania because you do not progress by gaining new abilities, but rather you do it by flipping switches and finding keys or important items. Although, you will find items that permanently increase your health or stuff that you can add to your inventory like potions to heal you or flags that allow you to create your own checkpoints. Your movement and combat is a little stiff, but intentionally so, as combat is about finding the right positioning from which to fire and knowing when to retreat. And the feeling of exploration in this game is honestly pretty incredible for the ZX Spectrum, as you go from towns to junkyards and forests. And some of these locations are very impressive, featuring multiple layers of parallax scrolling, a very smart use of colors, and a pretty great soundtrack. You'll even face off against bosses, though I always seem to get destroyed. And there's even vehicle sections, which is very rare for a ZX Spectrum game. It's honestly incredible to see what modern developers are doing with the ZX Spectrum, and this is one game I highly recommend you check out. This is Black Widow, a twin-stick shooter for arcades released in 1982 by Atari. You play as a spider, and you need to defeat the various bugs and insects that crawl your way before they get to you, while collecting their point icons, which lose value the more time you take to collect them. Graphically, the game is done entirely in vector graphics, which is honestly really amazing when playing in HD at night. You just gotta love that light show. But what really sets this game apart is the ecosystem. You see, some enemies drop eggs when you defeat them, and you cannot destroy those eggs. Instead, the eggs need to either hatch into a new enemy that you can then take down, or they'll have to be eaten by another insect. But some hatched insects are actually too strong for you, so instead of defeating them, you need another type of bug to visit your web and eat those instead. And while all of this goes on, there's yet another type of bug that explodes when hit, taking you and everything out within its blast range. And if you're not careful, you can set off a chain reaction with multiple of these. Like, this is a pretty interesting enemy system because sometimes you need to use the other enemies to your advantage. And playing this on a modern controller feels surprisingly fluid. If you told me that this was some indie game released recently, I would have believed you because Black Widow just carries that energy. Once again though, I'm playing this as part of the Xbox 360's game room, though thankfully this one actually did get ported to the PlayStation 4 as part of the Atari 50 compilation. If you're into twin-stick shooters, give this one a try. You might just be surprised by how modern it feels. This is The Scheme, an action-adventure game for the PC-88 with some pretty awesome music by none other than the legend himself, Yuzo Koshiro. The game kind of reminds me of Seraphima in that it's a non-linear action exploration game, but you don't actually progress by getting new abilities. Rather, once again, you need to find the items that automatically will unlock your path. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Your movement is fairly stiff, as you can only jump and fire. But by defeating enemies, you can catch orbs which will heal you or increasing your energy. And energy in this game is essentially experience, as you level up once you have enough, allowing you to cause more damage with each shot. As you progress, you'll also find items that will increase your maximum health or automatically level you up. There's also other items you'll pick up that will increase your fire rate or make you take less damage. But as far as I know, the only actual Metroidvania style upgrade you get in this game are the jump boots, which let you jump slightly higher to reach new areas. So I guess maybe this is a Metroidvania after all? I don't know, I'll leave that one up to the experts. One interesting thing about this game is that it actually has two soundtracks depending on your PC-88 sound chip. But considering both are by the same composer, they sound excellent regardless of which one you pick. The Scheme is considered as one of the rarest and most expensive games for the system, though thankfully it seems PC-88 fans have done a good job at preserving this one, as you should find it on most ROM sites with a PC-88 section. Check it out if you can. Heroes of Might and Magic 2 is an attempt at bringing the classic Heroes of Might and Magic formula to the Game Boy Color. Though the name is somewhat unfortunate because it's not actually trying to port Heroes 2, but rather it's a simplified version of the formula from the PC games. In fact, I would almost say it's somewhere in between Heroes 1 and 2. This was a game that I used to own while growing up on my Game Boy Color, and I would spend hours playing this. You have a full campaign to play with a wide selection of heroes to choose from, or you can select from one of 23 pre-built scenarios. From there on, it's up to you to explore the world, gather resources, conquer cities, create buildings for your cities, train armies, recruit and level up your heroes, and manage the morale of your troops. And if you've never played the early Heroes games, there are no diplomacy or espionage options like in other 4X games. In this game, every faction is everyone's enemy. There are no alliances to be made. This is a game that really should not work on the Game Boy Color, and even then, your expectations need to be somewhat tempered, because again, despite the name, this is not a port of Heroes 2. But if you're willing to give it a try, you'll find a very fun, if not particularly challenging version of Heroes of Might and Magic. And believe it or not, this game was actually my introduction to the series as a kid, and I still proudly own my copy to this day. Check it out if you can, you might just be surprised. And there you go, a selection of 8-bit hidden gems that I think you should check out. Are there any games I missed? Let me know in the comments. In the meantime, I'd like to thank all my Patreon supporters, including my newest backers, my creepy senpai. Why are you so creepy, my dude? Earl Grey, my favorite tea, Mikhail Raidem, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and Godzilla's cousin, Mazenzilla. Thank you for helping make the channel better. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. Bye!